Hello and welcome to this second lesson in the topic on climate. In the previous lesson we looked at the Earth and its atmosphere. Today we need to look at something called the carbon cycle. So in your books, as you would do for any other lesson, I'd like you to write the title please, Carbon Cycle. By the end of this lesson you should be able to describe how the levels of carbon dioxide change in the atmosphere over the course of a day. You should be able to use the carbon cycle to name some carbon stores, and you should be able to use some equations to explain the processes that exchange carbon dioxide to and from the atmosphere. So carbon dioxide is a part of the Earth's atmosphere. Okay? So carbon dioxide is a part of the Earth's atmosphere. It plays an important role because it allows plants to carry out photosynthesis, and it also insulates the Earth. Okay? If we didn't have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the Earth would get too cold and life would not be able to live. So we can say that carbon dioxide insulates the Earth keeping it warm enough to support life. Okay, so carbon dioxide is found in our atmosphere and it keeps the Earth warm, and it's also used in something called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. Okay, you would have heard about this, but we can just briefly discuss it here. Photosynthesis is how plants use the sun's energy and carbon dioxide to make glucose. So we can say photosynthesis where plants use carbon dioxide and water to make glucose and oxygen, using the sun's energy. Using the sun's energy. So photosynthesis is where plants use carbon dioxide and water to make glucose and oxygen using the sun's energy. We can show photosynthesis in the following word equation. Okay? So the word equation for photosynthesis is carbon dioxide plus water will make, and we always draw an arrow in a word equation, we never use an equal sign. Let me just make that a bit better because that's going to really annoy me. Like so. In the presence of light, and we always put light on the arrow because light isn't a substance we can hold, we'll make glucose and oxygen. For this reason, photosynthesis removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So we can say that photosynthesis removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. On the other hand, there is a second reaction that adds carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. And that reaction is known as respiration. Respiration. Now, respiration is where organisms use the energy trapped in glucose. So we can define respiration as where living things release energy from glucose. Now this adds carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. So it adds carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Now, to make this easy to remember, respiration is the reverse of photosynthesis, except without using light. So if we were to write the word equation for respiration, we would have oxygen plus glucose makes carbon dioxide and water. Carbon dioxide and water. So this takes in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, photosynthesis, whereas respiration adds carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Keep these two definitions in mind because we're going to be referring back to them in a moment. There are some other processes you need to know about, but it's probably best now that we talk about the carbon cycle and we show what it looks like. Okay? So your next keyword or key term is carbon cycle. The carbon cycle. Okay? So we can define this as shows the stores of carbon and summarises how carbon and its compounds enter and leave these stores. So it shows the stores of carbon and summarises how carbon and its compounds enter and leave these stores. In a posh way, it just shows how carbon is moved from the atmosphere into carbon stores. So we can say shows how carbon is moved from the atmosphere into carbon stores and vice versa, so in reverse, and vice versa. Now, at this point, it's probably best we define what a carbon store is. So, a carbon store can be defined, I'll just scratch my back, probably a bit too much information, but probably want to know why I stopped writing. A carbon store is a place where carbon and its compounds may remain for a long time. May remain for a long time. Okay. Now, some examples of carbon stores include the atmosphere. They include the oceans. So, what colour shall we use? We can use this one. Can say, e.g., the atmosphere, the oceans, sedimentary rock, we've got, what else have we got? Fossil fuels, which we'll talk about in a minute. We've got plants and animals. And finally, we've got the soil. These are all areas where carbon can be stored. Carbon is in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. It can dissolve into the oceans. It can be trapped inside sedimentary rocks. Fossil fuels are made up of carbon because fossil fuels are made of dead animals and plants, which are made up of carbon. And soil contains lots of carbon. Our final keyword today, before we have a look at a picture of the carbon cycle, is the word combustion. Combustion. Now, combustion is when we burn a fossil fuel. So, burning a fuel to react it with oxygen. When we combust something, it creates carbon dioxide, which goes off into the atmosphere and adds carbon to the atmosphere. So combustion, we can say combustion of fossil fuels releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Okay. So we've got the carbon cycle, shows the stores of carbon and summarises how the carbon and its compounds enter and leave these stores. It basically shows how carbon is moved from the atmosphere into the carbon stores and out of the carbon stores. A carbon store is a place where carbon and its compounds may remain for a long time, such as the atmosphere, the oceans, sedimentary rocks, fossil fuels, plants and animals, and soil. Combustion is when we burn a fuel to react it with oxygen. So if we refresh our screen, and for this one we need to add an image from the PowerPoint. So the carbon cycle looks like this. We've got the atmosphere, which is a store of carbon. So if I circle our carbon stores, so we've got our carbon stores in orange, we've got the atmosphere, we've got the oceans, we've got sedimentary rocks, we've got fossil fuels, we've got animals and plants and the soil. These are all carbon stores. Now, carbon moves from one store to another via either photosynthesis, respiration, combustion. It can also move by dissolving. So we can say that carbon moves from one carbon store to another via photosynthesis, respiration, dissolving, or combustion. What I would like you to do is, if you're lucky enough at home to have a printer, you can print off, and as long as your parents don't mind, print off this image and glue it in your books. If not, I would like you to quickly sketch it in your books. You don't have to draw the trees, you don't have to draw the cars, you can just write the name. So you could put animals, plants, factories, cars, etc., and write all the names to link it up. And you need to get this written down. So pause the video now, make sure you've got this drawn, press play when you're ready to continue. Okay then, so you should have drawn that by now. You're going to need it to answer the questions. So what I would like you to do now is I would like you to have a go at the questions on the PowerPoint, please. They look something like this. I would like you to pause the video. For the first one, you need to leave the correct word in the sentence. For the second one, you need to write out the question before answering it. Once you've finished the questions, have a different colour pen to hand, press play on the video, and we'll go over the answers together. So pause the video now, have a go. Okay, so you should have had a go at those videos by now. Let's get our questions put in. So we want this one. First of all, make it a bit bigger so that we can read it. So, you should have written the sentences out, leaving the correct word in place. So, carbon dioxide enters the atmosphere by respiration. Respiration adds carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. And combustion. Combustion adds carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. It leaves the atmosphere by photosynthesis and dissolving. Photosynthesis removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and dissolving allows carbon dioxide to move into the oceans. The atmosphere is a store of carbon. Other sources of carbon include sedimentary rocks and fossil fuels such as oil. So your sentences should have read: carbon dioxide enters the atmosphere by respiration and combustion. It leaves the atmosphere by photosynthesis and dissolving. The atmosphere is a store of carbon. Other stores of carbon include sedimentary rocks and fossil fuels such as oil. Let's get our second and final question put on the board, and we'll go through it, and then we're done for today. So it says, describe a route that a carbon atom might take around the carbon cycle. Name 4 carbon stores that the atom passes through and how it moves from one store to another. So this is where you needed your diagram of the carbon cycle to answer it. Okay, so you should have said, for example, you could have said that carbon dioxide starts in the atmosphere, which is a carbon store. You could have then said that it moves into animals, which is another store, via respiration. You could have then said that the animals die and become a fossil fuel. Animals die, becoming a fossil fuel. Again, a fossil fuel is another store, so we've got 3 stores already. Combustion releases the carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. So combustion releases carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. You could have then said that the oceans, which is a store, absorb the carbon dioxide by dissolving. Absorb the carbon dioxide by dissolving. Okay then, so hopefully that has made some sense. Hopefully you've marked your work and made any corrections necessary. If we have a quick look back at our learning objectives. So now you should be able to tell me how the levels of carbon dioxide change in the atmosphere over the course of a day. In the daytime there's photosynthesis, which is absorbing all of the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So then the levels of carbon dioxide go down. At night, the sun is not around, therefore there is no photosynthesis and carbon dioxide levels begin to rise again. Can you use the carbon cycle to name some carbon stores? You should be able to tell me that the atmosphere, sedimentary rock, soil, oceans, animals, plants, fossil fuels are all carbon stores. And can you use some equations to explain the processes that exchange carbon dioxide to and from the atmosphere? You should be able to tell me the equation for respiration, and you should be able to tell me the equation for photosynthesis. I hope this video has been of some help. If you have any questions, please comment below in Google Classrooms or send me an email directly and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Until the next video, take care.